Please be seated. Good morning. We're delighted to see all of you here for this historic meeting. A lot of you have come a long way, some of you on the red eye, and I appreciate the efforts you've made to be here. We're here for a clear purpose: to improve and expand educational television for our children. The ability of the United States to make the 21st century the age of greatest possibility in our nation's history depends in no small measure on our ability to build strong families today, to help our parents to succeed not only in the workplace but in their most important job, raising good, well-educated, well-balanced, successful children. That is why we have worked so hard to give our families more control over one of the most influential forces in our nation, television. As all of you know better than I, it is now a major part of our national landscape. A typical child watches 25,000 hours of television before his or her 18th birthday. Preschoolers watch 28 hours of television a week, and at least during the Olympics, so do presidents. We have dedicated ourselves to giving parents the power to screen out television they believe their children should not see. That's what the V-chip was all about. I was proud to sign the telecommunications law with the V-chip requirement to give parents the ability to stop programming that they think is inappropriate for their young children to see. You in the entertainment industry have certainly been doing your part. Meeting here in the White House 5 months ago, you volunteered to rate shows for content. You came together as responsible corporate citizens to give America's families an early warning system. Parents who use the V-chip will now be able to block objectionable shows before it's too late. Together, these initiatives constitute an invaluable arsenal for America's parents. And I'd also like to point out that this is a challenge being met in the appropriate way, by people working together and coming together, not fighting and drifting apart. But that is only half the battle. As Americans, we have to define ourselves not simply by what we stand against, but more importantly, by what we stand for. Now we have the opportunity to use the airways for something positive: educational programming as great as our kids. Television can be a strong and positive force. It can help children to learn. It can reinforce rather than undermine the values we work so hard to teach our children, showing children every day what it means to share, to respect themselves and others, to take responsibility for their actions, to have sympathy with others who have difficulties, even to recognize that it's not easy being green. This morning, I'd like to hear from you about what we can do to broaden the range of quality educational programming for children. I hope we can focus on 3 specific issues. First, I'd like to talk about the new research that shows how kids can learn valuable lessons from TV over the course of their young lifetimes. Second, I'd like to find out more about what good shows look like. Third, I'd like us to talk about how we can break down the barriers to the development and production of quality educational programming for children. Before we begin, I'd like to make an announcement. For the past year, I've been calling upon the Federal Communications Commission to require broadcasters to air a minimum of 3 hours of genuine educational programming a week. 3 hours a week, 180 minutes a week, about 2.5% of the entire schedule. Such a requirement would halt a steep and troubling decline. As recently as the early 80s, the 3 major networks aired several hours more than that of children's educational and informational shows. But by 1990, they were down to 2 hours a week, or less than 2 hours a week. The number is inching up now, but we must do more. The airwaves that broadcasters use, after all, belong to all of us, and in exchange for their use, broadcasters are required to serve the public interest. I cannot imagine anything that serves the public interest more than seeing to it that we give our children at least 3 hours of educational television a week. That's why it gives me great pleasure to announce that the 4 major networks, the National Association of Broadcasters, and some of the leading advocates for educational television have come together to join me in supporting a new proposal to require broadcasters to air 3 hours of quality educational programming a week. This proposal fulfills the promise of the Children's Television Act. That television should serve the educational and informational needs of our young people. It gives broadcasters flexibility in how to meet those needs, and it says to America's parents, you are not alone. We are all committed to working with you to see that educational programming for your children makes the grade. I urge the FCC to adopt this proposal, to make the 3-hour rule the law of the land. Television can build up young lives rather than tear them down. I'd like to say a particular word of thanks to Congressman Ed Markey for his work on this issue, and a very special word of appreciation to the Vice President for his tireless efforts, along with Greg Simon, to bring about this agreement. I thank them very, very much. Today we can work to imagine television as a force for good, to imagine what television for children would look like if it resembled what we imagined it was when we were children or when you first got started in this business. In recent days, as families have gathered to watch the Olympics, we've all been reminded about the good that television can bring into our homes, how it can bring us together, how it can inspire and educate us. This should be our standard. I'm anxious now to get to work. And I'd like to invite 3 people to come up here for some comments of their own about the agreement that has been reached. Eddie Fritz, the President of the National Association of Broadcasters. Les Moonves, the President of CBS Entertainment. Peggy Charon, founder of Action for Children's Television. Peggy, Les, Eddie, would you come up?
Thank you. Mr. President, Mrs. Clinton, Mr. Vice President, Mrs. Gore, let me begin by making clear, as broadcasters, we consider ourselves Americans first and broadcasters second. We agree with you that as a nation, broadcasters recognize that children are our most valuable asset. We take seriously our obligations to broadcast to the needs and interests of children in their respective communities across the land, and broadcasters are particularly cognizant of our obligation to serve the educational and informational needs of children, which was set forth in the Children's Television Act. Now, I'm extremely pleased that we have reached an agreement with your representatives on the proposed changes of the rules. An outline of this proposal I have just given to the President, and we believe that this does, in fact, offer broadcasters the flexibility under which we can meet our obligations under the law. That was a very important part of our being able to put this arrangement together. We also believe that if the FCC implements this agreement according to the outline which we have constructed, that we will oppose any effort to challenge the decision in court, and I can assure you that NAB will not file a challenge ourselves. We would hope that the administration and all of the children's advocacy groups joining with broadcasters would work together in opposing any decision that goes beyond the boundaries of this agreement. We believe we will be successful, and the children of the United States will be the beneficiaries. Thank you.
Mr. President, Mrs. Clinton, Vice President Gore, Mrs. Gore, we are pleased to join you in this important agreement to renew and expand our commitment to provide quality children's programming, and pleased that this issue is moving in a positive direction for all parties concerned, and most importantly for the children of America. We applaud your leadership in this area. I think I speak for many broadcasters when I say we are proud of our commitment to serving children and the broader public interest, and we are sometimes frustrated when that commitment is questioned. There are already many wonderful children's educational programs on the air, programs like Bill Nye's and Beekman's World, to name a few, and I hope this meeting helps them win more of the acclaim they so richly deserve. And we are prepared to go forward based on this agreement to develop new programs of the highest quality that will garner the largest possible audience. It will not be easy. A television programmer is a little like a Major League Baseball player. The best in the majors make out 7 out of 10 times. Given the intense competition for viewers, it is hard both in prime time and in children's programming to launch new shows, and we fail far more often than we succeed. It is easier to put on more programming. It is far harder to put on more quality programming that kids will actually want to watch. But that is our challenge, and is one that broadcasters will take on aggressively. Mr. President and Mr. Vice President, just as our task does not end with this meeting today, I hope you take on another assignment on children's television. We need your help in calling for a new partnership between broadcasters and parents. When we air these programs and tell parents when and where to find them, parents in turn need to encourage their children to watch. Many of the programs on now are well suited to parents and children watching together, and I believe many of the experts here today would agree that children and parents watching together enhances the educational potential of these shows. Such a call to parents is tailor-made for the spirit of this agreement. We will look forward not only to our dialogue today, but to an ongoing discussion and cooperation with all who are concerned with the future of our children. Thank you very much.
And here is a parent, and even a grandparent, and I was afraid I would float right by the podium because I'm so pleased to be here today for what I think is a very historic event. This is the first time in 26 years that we have all parts of the problem agreeing that we really have to do something to put terrific TV for kids on the air. I didn't know when I went to the Federal Communications Commission 26 years ago what a political problem children's television was. I thought, you know, I talk to the networks and a few stations and say, hey, parents are ready for something terrific. Just give it to us and we'll work to glue the kids to the couch. It turned out that there were a whole lot of political forces keeping that from happening. When the Children's Television Act passed, I thought, this is it. That was 6 years ago. We're going to get what we need. Well, that didn't turn out quite as I had hoped because it didn't really set a level playing field for what's terrific. And what's wonderful about today is that it does just that. So it's as helpful to the broadcasters, I think, as it is to America's families. And as far as thank yous go, what I discovered is that if the White House, if the people that are working to make the world work better in this country aren't focused on a problem, it probably won't happen. And I want to thank President Bill Clinton and Vice President Al Gore and their spouses, Tipper Gore and Hillary Clinton, for focusing on what some people may think of as a little piece of the problems of educating our children to grow up happy, healthy, wise, and participating members of a democracy. It's not little. As the president said, anything they spend so much time with, we should spend as much time as we can making wonderful. And I think this is the beginning of a new partnership. And I promise I will supply glue to America's parents to glue the kids to the couch so they watch what's wonderful. Thank you very much.
Great job, Peggy. Please be seated. The first subject we're going to talk about is the influence of television on children. We have some good presentations here, and I'd like to call on the First Lady to begin.
Thank you. What a great way to begin this meeting with that announcement. And now we turn to talking about what we mean by quality television. As the President has pointed out, the technology of television is not intrinsically good or bad, but it does have the potential to do both, particularly to be a powerful force for good in our children's lives. But it depends so much on the decisions made by people in control of that technology and what their values are and whether or not they know how to produce and then enlist audiences for quality television. Thanks to a growing body of research, we know what quality television can do for children and what a compelling impact it can have on the educational and intellectual development of children. I'd like to turn to someone who has spent quite a bit of time studying this issue. Along with her husband, Professor John Wright, Professor Aletha Houston are co-directors of the Center for Research on the Influence of Television on Children at the University of Kansas. They've been to the White House before to talk with us about their important work. They are among the researchers who understand the positive effects that television can have on children. Dr. Houston, you have been studying television and children for years, and your early studies confirmed what many of us experience in our own homes, that educational programs help prepare preschool children for school. Could you share with us the findings from your most recent study that you think would be of the greatest interest to parents?
Thank you, Mrs. Clinton. It's a pleasure to do this. I'll begin with the most important finding from this study. Children who were frequent viewers of educational children's television in their preschool years had higher grades in high school than infrequent viewers. They also had higher levels of academic motivation. The study was a follow-up of two groups of children studied in the 1980s, one group by Professor Daniel Anderson in Massachusetts and the other by John Wright and me in Kansas. For all those children, at that time we collected information about their families, their intellectual abilities, and detailed diaries of their television viewing. From those, we calculated the number of hours spent viewing Sesame Street, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, Captain Kangaroo, and other educational programs for children. In 1994, with funding from the Markle Foundation, we located and interviewed 570 of those children who were now between 15 and 19 years old. For most of them, we also obtained high school transcripts. The hours spent viewing children's educational programming predicted high school grades in English, math, and science. Frequent viewers also had higher expectancies of their own success, and for boys, valued achievement in English, math, and science more than children who had not watched much educational programming. Statistical controls assure that these results were not, I repeat, not due to differences in early language ability or to differences in parents' education between children who were heavy viewers and those who were not. We think the best explanation for these patterns is that educational television provides an early learning experience that enables children to enter school well prepared for the early tasks in school. We have a lot of other evidence that, in fact, it does just that. That initial preparation increases the odds of success in those critical early years and sets children on a trajectory of repeated successes that ultimately has some long-term consequences.
Thank you very much, Dr. Houston, and I think the results of that research suggest an answer to Mr. Moonves's question is how do we persuade parents that this kind of television programming is in the interests of their children, and talking about the relationship with school success is one of those arguments that we all should be making. This study also tells us that children learn from television, but it might be helpful to understand how they learn, why they learn. Dr. Robert Phillips from the American Psychiatric Association is with us, and in my earlier discussions, both here and in San Francisco, on this topic, I have been struck by his insights into the power of television on children. Dr. Phillips, can you explain why television can be and is such a powerful teaching tool?
I'd be happy to, Mrs. Clinton. Children are like information sponges. They soak up everything that they see, and then they wring out that sponge behaviorally in the actions that they engage in throughout their lifetime. We've used all sorts of metaphors to describe the way in which children learn. I used one once when we were together, describing them as little VCRs that record everything and then play them back. The Vice President reminded me, though, that some of those VCRs just blink 12, 12, 12. Children, as the President mentioned a moment ago, clearly spend more time watching television than probably any other life activity other than sleeping. If that's the case, it seems wholly logical that we need to pay careful attention to what they're doing during that time and how we can use that time more effectively. We know from the studies that have been conducted by Dr. Houston and studies that have been conducted in this country for the past 40 years that television is a powerful influencer of behavior. It is a positive influence of the behavior, and that's one of the things we can't lose sight of. We've spent a fair amount of time talking about the negative effects of television. I want to spend 2 seconds talking about how powerful an educational tool this medium is. We know that children can build vocabulary simply from watching television. We know that it can stimulate interests, not only in things that they are already interested in, but areas remote to them that they may never have known of were they not to have been exposed to that stimulation by the television set. And certainly we know that it can motivate actions. I have a son who has improved his reading tremendously because some of the programming that he has viewed, as I mentioned to Mr. Burton earlier this morning, and shows like Reading Rainbow and others have been a remarkable stimulus to help children build on the necessary learning tools that they have. They cannot do it alone. They need our help as parents. We must support them by supporting positive educational programming in the schools and certainly through the networks. We have to help them be active television viewers. And by active television viewers, I mean not just sitting in front of the set, but watching, interacting, and then engaging with their parents to talk about the things that they've learned, how it's helped them, how it may not have helped them. It is important for us to recognize what it was like and remember what it was like to be a child. Remember how difficult it was to understand the world of big people. Remember how difficult it was to get a clear sense of purpose. Remember how confusing the good and the bad is that we see. If we don't remember this, if we don't focus our attention on encouraging kids to use this medium in a productive way, it will be extraordinarily difficult for us to forget the consequences of our neglect.
Thank you, Dr. Phillips. And I think that that message about how positive television can be, since we dwell so often on the negative, not only about television, but other aspects of our society, is a key message to come out of this meeting, that there is a lot of good that can be and is being done on television. We need to highlight that, and we need now, with this new agreement, to do even more of it and bring it to the public's attention. Another recent study that shed new light on the state of children's television was conducted by the Annenberg Public Policy Center of the University of Pennsylvania under the direction of Kathleen Hall Jamieson. In addition, Dr. Jamieson has recently announced the creation of a blue ribbon group to review programs designed for children and to identify those that do the best job of what Dr. Houston and Dr. Phillips have told us can be done. Dr. Jamieson, you are immersed in this issue of television. What new information on the positive influence of television do you find most surprising?
We conducted a national survey of parents and their 10 to 17-year-old children, and what we found was that the parents and the children agree that television has done more good than harm in the lives of their children. We also found that parents are more concerned with what the children watch than how much they watch, which is a consistent finding. And I think our most interesting finding, when asked whether they would use the V-chip more to encourage their children to watch positive programming or to block out the negative programming, our parents told us that they would use the V-chip to help their children find and view the positive programming. We asked the parents whether they thought there was a high amount of quality programming for elementary school children and preschoolers, and found that they're very satisfied with the amount of programming for preschoolers, a finding consistent with our content analysis of 3 days of children's programming. And in particular, the parents and our content analysis singled out PBS, Nickelodeon, and the Discovery Channel for providing a high amount of high-quality preschool programming. But our content analysis and the survey suggested consistently that the elementary school child has far less quality program than the primary school child, and more importantly, and this is the second finding that I found interesting, the parents were not aware of much of the high-quality programming that was available for the elementary school child. So, for example, where 64% can tell us that Sesame Street is good programming for preschoolers, only 5% could identify Bill Nye the Science Guy and 2% Beekman's World as programming suitable for the elementary school children. These are excellent programs. They're already existing in the market. A market economy can't work in the absence of information. And so we asked, as one of our recommendations, that media critics do a better job bringing parents' attention to these high-quality programs, that networks do a better job promoting them, and that they be scheduled at times the children are able to watch. In one market, Bill Nye the Science Guy was scheduled at 6 a.m., and as the parent of children who recently were teenagers, I can tell you I didn't want them up at 6 a.m. I was grateful that they were sleeping at that time. In sum, we found evidence in the survey and content analysis that television can be a positive force. We need more quality programming for elementary school children. We need more information to help the parents find what is there and what is going to be there under this exciting new proposal.
Well, it is exciting because there's a market there, and just as with any market, if demand can be stimulated because of more information and accessibility, there's an audience there. And I think that's one of the key messages that we want to get across today. In February, Jack Valenti announced an industry initiative to rate television shows to help parents guide their children's viewing habits. That was another very important step in the voluntary partnership between the industry and the public. And Jack, can you give us an update on the project?
Yes, Ms. Clinton. An implementation group has been formed, composed of all segments, broadcast, cable, and movie studios, plus PBS, the creative guilds, and others within the production community in this country. We have been meeting, we've been meeting a lot. And right now we're going through what I call a listening phase, where we are assembling people of various groups around the country, organized and unorganized, but not disorganized, I might add, in which they have come to tell us of their concerns, their anxieties, their apprehensions, and some ideas about how to structure a rating system that is family-friendly, simple, easy to understand, and most of all, fixed and honorable purpose. We've met with religious groups last week. We'll meet with some more. We've met with parent-teacher organizations, school administrators. We have met with the medical community, and I'm pleased to say Dr. Phillips was part of one of those groups where he made some very insightful comments, which we have taken to heart. Indeed, we are listening, and to paraphrase the leader of the free world, I feel their pain sometimes. And so we're doing our dead level best, Mrs. Clinton, to redeem the pledge we made to the President and the Vice President. This industry is together in a seamless web of unity, and I'm grateful for that. A bit surprised, but grateful. And we will do our dead level best to make it work.
I know you will, Jack. Thank you so much for that report. What we'd like to do is to spend a few minutes talking about some of the issues that we've already touched on by the people who've already spoken, particularly the positive influences of television, how to go about bringing that to a wider audience, how to work through the pain and get to the programming that we know will make the impact on children as they go on in their academic and educational careers. And I would love to just open this up for a discussion, but I think I'd like to start with Margaret Lesh, who's the president of Fox Children's Network, because I know that she has some thoughts about this. Margaret?
Well, I do have some thoughts. I don't have any prepared remarks, but I'd just like to make a couple of comments to what I've heard and make some discussion point comments. I do believe that television has a very positive influence on children, and I've been in this business. This is close to my 26th year. Yes, I was there when Peggy started. And we in broadcasting and the production community have learned a lot over the years. But I look back to my childhood, and I watched a lot of television. I watched it with my parents. Frankly, I don't remember any educational shows, but I remember a lot of shows that had an impact on me, entertainment shows. And that's what has motivated some of us in television to make sure that programs do have stimulating entertainment, compelling messages, value lessons, and information that you can use. The shows that I watched as a child were generally entertainment shows, but I got a lot of value lessons from them, because a lot of it had to do with good and bad and good versus evil, and taught a lot of lessons about tolerance and respect. Over the years, we in broadcasting and in producers also, most of us have been producers, have tried to incorporate in our entertainment shows a lot of lessons dealing with everything from life entry skills, what we call socialization, to issues dealing with respect and tolerance and teamwork and not succumbing to peer pressure. In addition to that, in more recent years, we have made an effort to put more and more education and information, educational, curriculum-based education into our programs. All of the broadcasters right now do have educational programs on. I know there's been some debate and discussion about what's educational and what isn't. At Fox, for example, we have almost 4 hours worth of weekly educational programming that's based on teacher-based curriculum. But I'd like to speak to the entertainment shows, which I think also have valuable components, because all of our entertainment shows try to deal with values, because values are what is at the core of good storytelling. The more imaginative a story is, the more compelling it is. The more imaginative the story, I think the more provocative and thought-provoking it is for a child, and the better the show. One of the things that we've done more recently with our entertainment shows, and the reason why I point this out is I think that we can do more than simply confining our remarks to shows that have a core curriculum, but recognizing that a lot of entertainment shows can also be educational. For example, I received a letter about 2 months ago from a parent who said, you know, I have 2 children, and one child is hard of hearing, and the other child is regular, has a normal hearing. And I've noticed that my child that has normal hearing has learned to be an outstanding reader because of the closed captioning. And the parent brought this to my attention and suggested that, have you ever thought of opening, we all, the broadcasters, provide closed captioning in our programming. And he said, can you open some of your captioning? We thought it was a great idea, so now we have 2 of our general entertainment shows, in addition to one of our education shows, where we actually have opened the caption on the screen, so that children, even though they're watching an entertainment show, can see the words and learn the vocabulary. And I've gotten some great response from parents, and I've gotten good response from children. So these are the kinds of ideas that I think that we can be very, very proactive, and I'm very open to ideas and suggestions. And again, some of the best ideas we've had have come from parents.
I think that's a really important point, is to create this dialogue so that you're hearing back from parents and inviting it as these shows are advertised and given more attention, to be asking people to let you know what they're finding and how they're reacting. Someone who's been involved in children's lives and trying to work to better them for a very long time has just joined us, and delighted he is here, Dr. Alvin Poussaint, who's a professor of psychiatry, Judge Baker Children's Center, and also director of the Media Center for Children. And Dr. Poussaint, I would appreciate your perhaps sharing with us some of your views about children's programming.
Well, I think a lot of children's programming, and your comment that earlier on, I think in the history of television, in fact, there was more programs for children than there are now, that they moved to more commercialism and moved out of the prime slots and so on. I think one of the questions is what's educational for children, which I know has been debated. I see my friend Dr. Cosby here, and I know that I considered that program educational for families and for children, but it was entertainment driven, but yet it focused on a lot of issues and values and concerns associated with families and children. And so where to draw the line in terms of a purely entertainment-driven show and its educational value, and when to specifically have shows directed primarily at children, I think is an issue. I think, for instance, there on TV, that there are shows directed for children, but primarily to preschool children, but the ages are going up, but there's a gap for children from ages 6 to 9, 9 to 12, who need to watch educational television. I think a primary issue, as I see it, is financing for educational television. That is where you're going to get the money to do children's programming, which has come up over and over again at conferences that I have attended. And who's going to foot that bill and help develop such shows? We know that the National Endowment for Children's Educational Television is more or less defunct in terms of financing. Yet that's been a very important source of funding and seed money for many, I think, educational children's programming that have been really quality. And that we need either the networks or business or corporations or advertisers to help finance children's educational television, either on their own networks or on other networks. But I think, too, my final point is I think it's very important that children's educational programming have advisory boards and people consulting with them. As I look at all of the shows that have succeeded, have been most effective on PBS and elsewhere, on cable, have had good advisory boards that you can team up with the producers, the entertainers, to really make quality shows. I don't think that that happens within the networks, even though they have consults. They don't have people really working as a team, I think, to build really good quality children's programming. And I would recommend that, in fact, to all of the networks and to cable, and even recommend that the advertisers who support certain programming have advisors to consult with, panels to consult with about children's programming.
Dr. Poussaint, may I jump in here? I'm pleased to say that the networks do have such advisory boards. I can speak for Fox, but I can also speak for the other broadcasters, having previously worked at ABC and NBC. At Fox, we have an advisory board. It's made up of two child psychologists, a noted pediatrician, a law enforcement officer, 2 classroom teachers, and a social worker. And they work with us all through the year, and we invite new participants and have a flow through of information. We formed this when we started the Fox Children's Network to keep us educated as to the issues affecting children, and that goes a long way to providing us the data to make sure our shows reflect concerns and issues.
But is that also true for ABC and CBS and
well,
NBC?
I think we have some representatives from those. I know that NBC does, and I'm sure ABC does.
At what point do you bring in people who have an expertise? And I think that the networks have always had consultants, but I think there is a role for inspiring everyone who works in the field of children's television, and that you and others on that side of the table can fill that role. And I think that doing that in general, to get people thinking about big ideas for kids, as opposed to just being specific consultants on specific shows is really what you're speaking about. And I wholeheartedly support the think-a-thon approach to getting people inspired.
I agree.
Part of the issue, though, is not only being concerned about the big idea, but children are educated by everything that they see on television. And so it's the small ideas that are of great concern to me as a clinician. I recall a comment that was made by Dr. Poussaint not too long ago in New York when he and Dr. Cosby were addressing our association. And if you think back to the role that Dr. Cosby played when he was Dr. Huxtable, the kind of subtle messages that were given, particularly recognizing that a large segment of that viewing audience was made up by people who potentially were at high risk if they were African Americans for being hypertensive. A subtlety, making sure that when dinner was served, they served healthy foods, that they were conscious of salt usage, and made a comment about that at the table. These are the kinds of things that I think we have to pay attention to, not just in the big picture of children's educational programming, but in the subtle messages that come across the screen, because everything that kids see on television will educate them. The problem is that some of the education that they receive is potentially problematic to us all.
Also, Dr. Poussaint made an important point about the funding for such programming, and I'm so pleased we have representatives of advertisers here today, because it is very important that they be included in this discussion, and that they too have an opportunity to help promote educational television and to help provide the glue that Kate Charon referred to. And I was wondering if any of the advertisers who are here today would want to comment about the quality programming.
So I could comment. I think we all, as advertisers to children, very much support the drive for quality television. I think the trick is to make this fun so that children will want to see it. Because there's no sense in supporting something which the children are not going to watch anyway. And I think on these advisory committees, if we could have representatives from teachers and from advertisers as well, I think we could probably steer people in the direction of how do you make these programs fun and interesting for children to watch. We have a real problem with science education in this country, and there's a need to address that, and I think here television can really play a role, but we have to get groups of experts together to really decide how do we do it, how do we make it fun for children. And I can imagine that people like Seymour Papert at MIT, who's an expert in this area, both in education and fun education for children, could be of great help.
Well, that's an interesting point you raise, because many of the advertisers, such as your company and the others who are here today, do your own research. And you're targeting a certain audience, and you're targeting the parents of children as well as children themselves. So you would bring to the table, to this kind of advisory role, some very good information. And so getting the advertisers involved at an early stage, as you're suggesting, might be very helpful in terms of the quality of programming and then eliciting the sort of support from advertisers that is needed.
Thank you very much. I think to stay on schedule, we need to move to the next topic. It is clear that there's a consensus here and that the evidence supports the fact that the television can be, has been, and is, in many cases, a positive force in children's lives. So I think we ought to discuss a little bit about what makes a successful children's television program. And I'd like to ask Mrs. Gore to lead the discussion, and I'll turn it over to her now.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. And again, thank you so much for your extraordinary leadership on this issue, or we would not be where we are. As I listened to Dr. Houston and Dr. Jameson speak earlier, as well as the other experts, I began thinking about what Al and I did with our children when they were younger. And one thing we did was we recognized that our guidance was an opportunity to establish critical viewing at an early age. And the children, I asked them, I said, do you remember the shows that you really enjoyed that were on educational television? And they said, of course, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, Sesame Street, at that time 3-2-1 Contact, and Picture Page that Bill Cosby did, and Bill Nye the Science Guy. Basically, other than these programs, the TV set was supposed to be, and we all know what that means, off limits to them. Given the study results that were mentioned earlier, Al, I guess you and I are going to have to share some of the credit with Big Bird for our children's later educational talents and the grades that they got in school. Of course, as children get older, and as our children got older, the dynamics changed dramatically, and while their viewing remained limited, the shows they watched were determined more by negotiations between the children and the parents than by parental edict. I think probably most people would relate to that. And I don't have to tell all of you that are parents that the television battles were only one of the many battles that are fought in the home. Now, when our children began to be at that age where they were engaged in critical viewing, I became more aware, as did Al, of what was really on television, what was out there and available to them, whether it was programming or whether it was frightening previews for movies or no matter what. I mean, they brought that to my attention. I began working with other people, many of whom are here today, years ago, to raise awareness about the potential harmful influence of increasingly explicit sexual violence and violence in the media. And I guess because people identify me with this issue somewhat, I hear from parents all across the country, and I can tell you just anecdotally, they are still very, very concerned, and they see for the first time a real glimmer of hope that the industry itself is listening to them, is hearing their concerns. And they are agonizing over their children's quality of life and the popular culture in which we all must navigate and in which we must guide our children. I can relate, just as a parent, to the feelings of powerlessness that so many people feel. And everybody in this room is in a position to make them feel more powerful in their own home, given the tools they're going to be given to them. We are here to talk about a real gift to the American parent, and that is the V-chip. The V-chip, in my view, and I think in most people's view, will help protect children. But we also should think of the V-chip as a way to direct children to programs that reflect their values and their desires for entertainment, their priorities, and their definition of what is good entertainment. And I know that there are parents all around this country that are just as excited as I am about this extraordinary group of people gathered today with the goal of making television more positive, a richer medium, one that can help bring our children out of the crisis that we all know is gripping America in terms of their relation to the popular culture and their relation to their education. So I want to congratulate each and every one of you for making this a priority in America. I think it's extremely important. I would now like to turn to a person who is well known for making television programming entertaining, as well as Dr. Croissant said, value-laden, and a show that taught kids about life experiences, and that, of course, is Bill Cosby. And I'd like to ask you, what are the ingredients? How did you succeed? We want more of what made us love you so much.
First of all, if you know children, you have to know children. If you're a sponsor and you want to sell whatever it is your company makes, you can't be afraid of the children running away. Children will run away if they don't understand. They don't like something right away, but I've never seen a child that didn't change his or her mind if they knew that tomorrow they could come back and get it. One of the humorous things is that I remember our 5 children getting to the point where Mr. Rogers was annoying to them. and they would almost start to curse him. They said, no, I'm not hanging up my clothes, I'm not doing this for you. And so it was time for them to move on. But like Liberace, there was a new batch coming, right behind the ones who left. It's important for us to understand that, number one, you cannot accept a writer who says he or she doesn't see anything funny or humorous or entertaining about geometry. There are 100 things that are funny about geometry. 99 of them happen to be the person who doesn't want to study it. And so we're dealing with the human being. The human being becomes funny. The identification becomes funny. There are 150 things that can be funny about science and studying the veins of a leaf, but you've got to make it interesting. Children catch on to things that in their minds light up. I'm riding in the car with my child. She's about 9, and James Brown was singing, and she was in the back of the car, and it got to the point where James Brown said, "Good God." And she said, "Good God." Just like James Brown. And I wondered why that lit up more than any of the other things he had either spoken or sang. Good God. And I said to her, "Why did you remember good God?" She said, "That's because sometimes I hear people say it when they find something good, and it's God." So these connections, we've got to understand that when you give up on these children, I mean, 3 hours is nothing, but you can find gold if you get the proper writers, the proper producers. I find these people running away. I find them scurrying for the hills. 6 o'clock in the morning is not a time to put something on that is going to perhaps make a better human being, perhaps bring a family together. Education is important not only to children. I find that many immigrants coming here learned how to read, spell, write, and talk while watching the electric company. Now, if you people who put programs on want to put them on and you don't really have an idea of what will catch a child's imagination, let's go to social realities. Feeling ugly, rejection, belonging, uselessness, existence, misery, loneliness, fear, desperation, humiliation, anguish, meaninglessness. That's a juicy pile that you can light right into, write a story, and have it be about reading, writing, and dealing with the teacher. It's important to note that the things have not changed. Times have gone on, but they haven't changed. Today's child, what's number one? Home and the community. Number two is school. If we move TV up and put it in the home and have it in the community, where is the child's time spent? Even if a lower economic child doesn't have a TV or go home, he or she will go to some place where there is a TV. So, in closing, I'm just dismayed at the fact that we can have so many people of higher education who go on and take high-level jobs who cannot find a way, cannot find brilliant writers who want to give, who want to put out, and there are tons of actors who will give a free day to come in and perform. If you go to your top movie stars and you say, "We have a television program and this is about, and we'd like you to come in and do it, and we're going to put it on at X hour," you better believe that person will be there because they want to give back. I'm through.
Okay. Good job. Okay. All right, so we just need to replicate all that, right? and find incentives for those writers.
Yes, they're quite easy. I'll send them my list. and it's juicy. It's as juicy as sex.
Like a comment?
Last month, I had the chance to speak to the Business Council. That's the 100 largest companies in this country, the 100 largest advertisers. And I told them it's a myth that you can't have a television program which is popular and which teaches good values. I said, take the Cosby program as a prime example. Number one in the ratings for years. The residual rights sold for $1 billion, that's a B, $1 billion. And there was never an ounce of violence or sex or bad things in it because Bill Cosby and his advisor, Dr. Poussaint, saw to it. So the point is you can make money, get an audience, and serve the public interest and serve children as well.
Well, thank you. I think that's a good message. That's probably a pretty good incentive, even though you wanted to hush it up. Okay, thank you very much. We would now like to turn to Bill Nye, the science guy, who is right on my right. One of the most popular shows at our house is all about science. We don't just watch it, we get all the equipment and recreate the experiments. Not every time, but sometimes we do. But everyone knows the Vice President loves science. By the way, our children also watch your show.
About, they say half of the viewers are grown-ups. Now, does that include the Vice President?
Ooh, that's a trick question. Of course it does.
It's my turn?
It's your turn.
I just want to say what an honor it is to, it's just an honor to speak to such a distinguished and frankly fascinating group of people. This is it's a big day for me. People talk about viewers and what sort of viewers watch television. I was hanging out with my nephew last night, my brother's kid, and we were all gathered around television. He was fooling on the computer, and he was going through the internet, and he found this thing about that adults are less discriminating viewers of television than children. And I think that's what he said. I was watching the Olympics. I don't even know. Yeah. So the thing is that any television show has to primarily be entertaining, and I really emphasize this. People say, well, we want children on an educational show, it has to be educational, but primarily it has to be entertaining. And our show, the Bill Nye Science Guy show, we consider first of all an educational show. It has a lot of science in it, has a science backbone, has learning objectives that are science, but the first thing to go for is entertaining. And you have to, you really have to accept that. You have to go into that with that in mind. We get lots of letters, many, many letters all the time. People really like the show, but here's one that really charmed me. Dear Bill, like your show, mostly the part when you get stuff dropped on your head. And the reason for that is it's like a cartoon. It's fun when things like that happen. So things drop on your head because of gravity, and that's bigger than we are. And it's fascinating. Now, the thing about a television show, I really emphasize it's show, it's entertainment, but also in science education in particular, what we are able to do, what television is so good at, is showing you things. We can show you stuff. If I tell you that people walked on the moon and that things happen on the moon in a way that's very different than they happen on Earth, you can go, yeah, I'm sure they do. Yeah, people walked on the moon. That's great, sure. But when you see it, when you see these people running around the moon, jumping on the moon, learning on the moon, it's compelling, it's riveting, it's like nothing you can describe. And that is television's real strength. When you see people interacting, when you see people displaying good values, that's when it has a meaning that sort of transcends talking about it. Now, the other thing that we do on my show, which I think is essential, we talk a lot about children's programming and children viewers and so on. But on my show, we try to treat every viewer as a peer, that we are all scientists, everybody, no matter what age we are. We are all seek to have this understanding of the world, and we all have fun doing it. I mean, that's another thing about children's television. I mean, I know this is all very serious and stuff, but it's, you know, it's fun. Yeah, it's fun, right? Yeah. If I'm going too fast, yeah. Yeah. So what we do, another thing, I'll just tell you that has been very effective, is we have girls and what are now currently called people of color on the show doing experiments. And once again, they are peers. They are scientists. They're doing stuff. And you would think that this would be effective. I mean, just sort of a common sense sort of approach. You would think that that would make sense. If you, as a girl, saw another girl doing something on television that was fun and cool, then you would go for that. But boy, the research, it's way more than we ever expected. The way the viewers, girls and kids of color, respond to this stuff is way, way higher than at least I ever thought would be the case. And I think the reason is people want this stuff. Young viewers want to see this kind of program. And what we have to do is find a way to get everybody together to provide these viewers with this stuff, with this kind of programming. And I think it can be done. And it gets into this business of building a block of television shows so that people will watch one show to the next, because at least right now, children's television is sold in what are called day parts, pieces of the day, more so than on individual shows the way it is in prime time. I don't see that changing right away, but I think we can exploit that and take advantage of that. So I would say making the show entertaining is primary. Then having the show not talk down to people is very important. In fact, you'll find if you talk down to anybody, it doesn't go that well. In fact, you don't have to take my, as we say in science, you don't have to take my word for it. Try it. See what happens. And then with regard to advisors, we have an advisory board on the science show, but what the advice we get from these people is about science, is about the facts. This gets to, I think, the key to the success of my show so far is that every show is about just a couple of things. Every show has what we call learning objectives, a few things we're going to get across. Now, if you get, as Dr. Phillips said, these other details, if you get this other thickness, these things that are what I call part of the thickness, the stuff underneath, if you get that, that's great. But getting these few things across is always the objective. People and dinosaurs did not live at the same time. Ocean currents are driven by heat from the sun and saltiness of the water and so on. These are just like a couple things we're going to get across. And here's where I'm driving at. If you have learning objectives, these few things that you're going to get across, then you could use that to evaluate the show. Like, is this show the kind of show we want to use? Is this the show that's worth something we want to show to children? And as far as whether or not it can be done, I'm sure it can be done. And I'm very excited about today's announcement. I'm very excited to be here. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and we are sure it can be done too, and that's why we want to hear from you, because you're doing it, and we appreciate that. And I know I probably speak for the First Lady and all the girls in this country who feel like they have been stigmatized with the idea that they can't do science or they're not as good at science and math as boys, and you are combating that stereotype in what you're doing. I think that's absolutely terrific. To my left is LeVar Burton, and I'm delighted that you're here, and I want to ask you about your particular expertise in talking about the joy of reading to kids. Every parent knows that reading to a child is extremely educational, and LeVar Burton knows the joy of reading not to just one child, but to thousands of children, and the wonderful program Reading Rainbow. For those of you who only know him from Star Trek, you need to know that he's not just worried about the future of the universe, but the future of thousands of our children. And we'd like to hear how you are being as successful as you are, please.
Thank you, Mrs. Gore.
Thank you.
For those of you who don't know, Reading Rainbow is a half an hour of television on television every day in most parts of the country and Canada that is devoted to using this powerful medium, and many people have spoken quite eloquently this morning about just how powerful the medium is. In my view, it is probably the most powerful tool we possess in this culture, in this civilization, for addressing social growth and change. Let me say that one more time. Television is the most powerful tool we possess in this culture, in this civilization, for addressing social growth and change. Having said that, what we try and do on Reading Rainbow is take this powerful medium and steer children back in the direction of literature and the written word. And we do this, like Bill says, in a fun way. Our primary goal, our primary motivation is to share with children the information that reading is fun. Pick up a book, you can travel anywhere in the world in your imagination. And this is critically important to us as producers, because, like most of us in this room, we are aware that our children watch an inordinate amount of television, and what we try and do with Reading Rainbow is take kids and say, listen, this is television, we can only do so much. Go back now, have a personal experience with a book, pick up that book, and take that journey yourself. We also, I think, are successful on Reading Rainbow Excuse me, my voice is, this room is as cold as the Debbie Letterman studio. It's unbelievable. Thank you very much, ma'am. We take very seriously the educational level of our audience, and we find it really important to, as Bill said, not talk down. Children, we respect our audience in the sense that children are very discerning television viewers. They know when they're being lied to, they know when they're being put on, and they also have a sense of when you're being genuine with them. And I think one of the reasons why Bill's show is so successful, while Dr. Cosby's show is so successful, is that they have been able to create a link emotionally and psychically with children from a place of honesty and integrity, and that is critically important when addressing this audience. You have to come with your heart wide open to kids, because they'll see right through you if you don't. So these are things that we have had in mind as we've grown and developed with this show, and we want Reading Rainbow to be a show that not just encourages literacy and reading, but as we've gone on in years, and we've been on the air for 13 years now, we have felt it possible to take chances with our audience, and we've become more, in my view, than just a reading show. We have become a window into the world, and we've done it in the past several years, shows on Vietnam Veterans Memorial and homelessness and families and the makeup of families in this country and what it means to be a family. We try on Reading Rainbow to reflect life as it is. When I was growing up as a child, it was very difficult for me to find images that looked like me on TV. That is no longer the truth in today's television landscape. It's critically important to me that a show like Reading Rainbow be on, not just as the show's producer, but also as the show's host. To have a black man in this position as a role model for children is enormously important to me and to my kids. And like all parents, I want my children to grow up in a world that looked slightly different than the world in which I grew up in. I think it's all a responsibility and a desire that we have in common, and that is also a part of our mission at Reading Rainbow as well. I'd just like to close by saying I think it's wonderful, Mr. President, this announcement that we've made this morning. I'm all in favor of it. Everybody in this room, I'm certain, is in favor of it. The telling thing will be what the definition of educational content is. What we need to do is come up with a beneficial definition of what will be educational. And if we can do that, then I know we will have served the children of this country.
Well, thank you so much for that heartfelt delivery of your views. We appreciate it. Now we'd like to welcome Mr. Rogers to our neighborhood and thank him for creating the neighborhood that so many of our children learned to navigate when they were very young. And you can tell Dr. Cosby later where your sweater is, but we're not worried about that. Mr. Fred Rogers.
Thank you, Ms. Gore. It's been a real blessing for me for 40 years to be able to be in touch with America's families. And I always have thought children's television, that phrase, children come first. We must think of the needs of children first, and then the needs of television. And of course, there's some things that television can't give directly. We can't put food through the screen, and we can't offer a bed to the homeless through the screen. But we can offer people who love what they do, and I've seen that happen so often. I mean, you see it with Bill and LeVar and Dr. Cosby. You see these people who love what they do, and children get that, and they think to themselves, this is something that maybe I could do someday. maybe I could grow up to be that way someday. So we can offer all kinds of people who love what they do right in front of children. Not long ago, I had lunch with a very young teenager who said that when he saw his first bicycle race on television, he said, something clicked in me, and I thought, I want to do that. And so lately he's been riding about 80 miles a day, and he said, some year I'm going to try out for the Junior Olympics. Well, I think about all of those children whose lives are influenced by what they see and hear on television. And what a valuable gift, as LeVar says. We can just give them something that allows them to click inside with what's healthy with them. There's a song that I sing on the neighborhood that talks about feeling of anger. And it just seems to me it's so important that we give children a whole wide variety of ways to deal with the things that they're feeling. And I say, what do you do with the mad that you feel? When you feel so mad you could bite. When the whole wide world seems oh so wrong and nothing you do seems very right. What do? Do you punch a bag? Do you pound some clay or some dough? Do you round up friends for a game of tag or see how fast you go? It's great to be able to stop when you've planned a thing that's wrong and be able to do something else instead and think this song. I can stop when I want to, can stop when I wish, can stop, stop, stop anytime. And what a good feeling to feel like this and know that the feeling is really mine. Know that there's something deep inside that helps us become what we can. For a girl can be someday a woman, and a boy can be someday a man. We have to help children know what good feeling that is to be in control. There's so many things that we can do through television, and it may seem very unorthodox in this great, huge meeting here of all these important people, but no one has ever become a competent adult without the investment of others. And I wonder if you would mind if we would take just a half minute to think about all the people in our lives who have helped us to become who we are. Anybody who has wanted you to know that you have value. Would you mind taking a half minute to think of those people? Half minute of silence? I'll watch the time.
Come.
Well, whomever you've been thinking about, whether they're here or far away or even in heaven, imagine how proud they must be to think that you felt they made such a difference in your life. It's people like the ones you've been thinking about who need to fill the hours of children's television. We need to let people know, let our children know that such people are real and that our children can become such people. course, there are many other things that television can do. We can't mention them all here. Hopefully we can get together, and those of us who make television, we can get together and talk about these things in small groups. But one thing is that the goal of healthy self-esteem must be other esteem. We need to help our children care for themselves so that they're able to care for others. And we also need to help children become more and more aware that what is essential in life is invisible to the eye. That, and also the value of silence. The value of silence in all of our lives. Thanks very much for caring to continue this discussion that I think is so critical in all of our lives. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rogers. Thank you. I would now like to call on David Kleeman, who's the Executive Director of the American Center for Children's Television. And, for example, he's involved with selecting the winner of the Ollie Award for Excellence in Children's Programming. David?
Thank you. It's a very hard thing to follow, although one of the people that I was thinking about during that half minute was the man who's really the father of children's television in Canada, a man named Fred Rainsbury, who was the first person to put Fred Rogers on television and who passed away recently. And I had the opportunity to go back and read some of his writings and then write about some of the things that he brought to this question of how to serve children through television. I think the first thing to say about the Ollie Awards is that they are not merely an award. It's not sufficient just to say, here's the best programming, that's it. We use the awards competition as a process by which we engage well over 100 people from the television industry in professional development, in evolving definitions of quality on children's television. We do a few things that are absolutely unique. There are no categories in our competition. What we're looking for are the common elements that make a program, whether it's for very young children, very old children, whether it's public television, commercial television, local, national, succeed or fall short. Every entrant, whether their program goes to the finals or not, whether it wins an award or not, receives a summary of what the nominating panel said about their program, because it's very important to us that they have something to build from next time they make a program. And the final round of the competition is an intensive 3-day professional conference where people from throughout the television industry, also from education, from research, from child development, come together to talk about the programs that have been nominated, to review them, often how they succeed, how they fall short, and at the end those people vote for which programs should win the award. We also find that the informal sessions, the people who sit together in the hotel restaurant where we hold, or in their rooms, talking about their own expertise, their own experiences, are just as important as the formal sessions. I'd add that we're very closely affiliated, the Ollies are very closely affiliated with the International Children's TV Festival, the Prix Jeunesse, and that later this year we'll be bringing the award-winning programs from around the world to the U.S. and holding screenings around the country for television professionals so that people can see other models from around the world, other ways of using style and content to serve children. I think we have heard in individuals' presentations about their own programs very much the Ollie Awards definition of quality, and I just want to cite in 2 or 3 words each what we see as the 6 most important factors. I'll add that the Ollie Awards don't just honor educational programs. We believe that children have a need and deserve variety of programs, and therefore they honor programs that are of outstanding quality. But the first thing that we look for is objectives for the program. And every program, whether it's intended for fun or for learning, has to have objectives going in. The creator of Sesame Street said, television is a box into which all manner of things can be put, junk or treasure. We feel that objectives are what define what you're putting in that box. A program has to actively engage children. They have to have some response to the program, whether it's while they watch or whether it's after they turn the program off. It should be age-specific. You need a sense that the producers truly understand children and talk to children of a specific subset of children. Third, attention to writing and production values. children deserve the same quality of writing, the same quality of production as we expect as adults. Fourth, respect for children's intellect and emotions. One of the programs that did very well at this year's International Festival from the US was Goosebumps from Fox. I don't know if they define that as one of their educational programs, but it is a program that inspires children's emotions without overtaxing them. It respects them at the same time as it really gets them going, and it sends them running for the books after they turn off the television. Fifth, respect for diversity. We've already heard LeVar Burton talk about that, the idea that programming should look like America. And finally, programming has to be fun. Children have to want to watch it.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. That was a terrific summary of a lot of very, very interesting ideas. And I noticed a lot of people taking notes. I would now like to go to Jerry Laybourne, who is one of the most successful developers of children's educational programs, who has made Nickelodeon a leader in children's television, and ABC Disney had the good sense to hire her and give her this task. Jerry?
Mr. Rogers, I have to tell you that in my 30 seconds I spent a long time thinking about you. And you truly have been a mentor to all of us. And your children first mantra is one I heard loud and clear when I saw you for the first time with my 3-year-old niece, who is now 27 and a very successful poet. And I saw her attachment to you in a way that I had never seen on television. And it was purely because you liked her. And I think that set in stone for me the mission that I would try to bring with me into the world, which was liking my audience and showing them that they did come first, that television was just a way to get there. And I think that that's the first precept of doing anything good for kids, is to actually like them. Not to think that we necessarily have to relentlessly improve them, but to genuinely, as LeVar Burton mentioned, genuinely like and respect them. That only comes from listening to them. It only comes from silence from adults. And only comes from wanting to know kids on a broader basis. So much of the research that's done with kids right now is done to sell things to them, and not to hear what's in their hearts, and not to hear what they care about, or how they make their decisions, or how they make their friends, or how they care about their parents, which Dr. Cosby is absolutely right. Parents are still number one, and as a parent, I'm darn happy about that. Secondly, I think what we did at Nickelodeon and what I take with me to other things that I do is knowing, respecting, and liking the creative process. And this again speaks to something that Dr. Cosby spoke to. I think Joan Gans Cooney was an incredible role model, and another person that I thought of in my 30 seconds. When she brought the best and the brightest consultants, the best and the brightest creative people, the best and the brightest independent talent, she didn't go to the usual suspects. She brought the best and the brightest funders together and created this enormous legacy to our country of Sesame Street. I also believe, Dr. Phillips, that you're right, the small details are important. But I believe unless you vest your entire staff and everybody who works on behalf of kids with the mission of being responsible for making sure that those details are right, you will be lost. And that if we are reliant on consultants to tell us what is right and wrong, we will be lost. So that's why I like to take time at the front to educate people about where kids are developmentally and everything else. The third point I would make is spend enough money. And I think with what we've seen in the children's television landscape over the last 20 years, I think Peggy Charon would agree with me that the low point was in the mid-'80s when television, especially commercial television, was dominated by toy-driven product that was funded by toy manufacturers who had marketing schedules that they had to meet rather than meeting the needs of kids per se. Big companies like Disney and Warner Brothers and Fox and Nickelodeon came in and said, this is hooey. We are going to spend money on quality programming for kids. That combined with kids having better taste than I think the marketplace gave them credit for, and the public debate that went on in Washington helped to really cause the demise of that program form. Fourthly, I would just like to say that coming up with good programming for kids has a lot to do with innovation and not being copycats and not trying to look for formulas and not looking at what worked last season. And Nickelodeon has certainly been a leader at that. And one of the other people I thought about in my 30 seconds was Herb Scannell, who is the new president of Nickelodeon and who did more during my reign to push new and innovative things. And I count on him to continue doing that, as I will do where I am. And finally, I would just like to echo Dr. Cosby's comment about humor. My favorite study was one done at the University of Minnesota, which correlated kids' success in later life with the development of a sense of humor. And I know myself that it's the only thing that's helped me in the middle of corporate America. And I can testify that that's absolutely true. And I think that it's a way to kids' hearts and minds. Kids will always remember a joke more than they will remember something didactic that is given to them. And if I could take just one more minute on this august occasion, I have to confess that I'm a worrier. And I'm one of those parents who had window guards on the inside and outside of their windows, so that'll just tell you how much of a worrier I am. But I worry that an occasion like this, where we sit and congratulate ourselves about regulation, I worry, first of all, that we feel like we should congratulate ourselves that we even got into this state where we need it. And I worry that we think that the problem is solved. And I worry that we will focus on the wrong things. And I worry that we will focus on station managers filling out forms and trying to comply with regulations that are complicated. I worry that we won't focus on the main idea, which is bringing the best and brightest to America's families and kids. I worry that we won't focus on truly creative ways to get kids excited about learning. And I worry that we won't continue to respect the audience like Mr. Rogers has admonished us. I worry that new technology will get going on the same bad foot that every other technology has gotten on in terms of kids, where the lowest common denominator, toy-based programming starts the new realm. I worry that we won't look at CD-ROMs and see how can we make those truly learning tools. And I worry that it won't happen fast enough to show us the true promise of what the new technology can bring. In all of the research that we're doing out in the field, we see that kids love learning, and they love learning on computers, and they love learning wherever they can get some feedback. So let us please get there fast. I worry that parents don't know the importance of their role, and that's been mentioned by Mrs. Clinton and others. How do we help parents understand how hungry their kids are to spend a few moments with them, and that television is actually an electronic part that can provide some moments of intimacy and value sharing? And then I have one final worry, and I promise to be quiet. I worry that educational labeling will backfire. Whenever you say education to a kid, they get an expression on their face that's somewhat between eating a pickle and a kumquat. And I worry that if we label things educational, it will serve as a beacon for kids to turn it off. And that would be the last thing that we should ever want. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jerry. And I think you've already stimulated a comment from Dr. Cosby.
Well, just briefly, for the people who want to sponsor educational programs, I think maybe Jack Valenti is the only one here who would remember. There was a thing called radio, and they had a whole bunch of shows, 15 minutes. And there was a program called Captain Midnight.
Yes.
And if you bought a decoder ring,
that's right.
Then you would know how so-and-so got out of a jam.
Right.
I'm just saying to sponsors, it's educational, you've got CD-ROM, everything is wide open to whatever a child has in the room. So at different times for anybody's program, you could say hook into whatever, if you know how to do it, and maybe the child isn't even aware that this is education. They just got it. And the other point I want to make is we've got to really guide these children, and it's our responsibility. A yelping child does not necessarily know what it wants. It just knows it's yelping, and we've got to find out what it is. It's quite important, and that's our job. The set cannot teach. The set cannot teach. It can aid, but it cannot teach.
Okay. It's been a great presentation. I want to throw it open to a few comments in just a very few minutes because we have a lot of other people to get to. I did want to mention that Jerry included children in focus groups when she was with Nickelodeon. I don't know how many of you have children on the advisory boards or listening to the children's perspective, but it seems to me that that is critical. Yes?
Yes, I want to speak on behalf of the Coalition of Child Advocacy, Education, and Health Groups that have been working with us at the Center for Media Education for the last 4 years to strengthen the rules on the Children's Television Act, and say how pleased I am at the announcement today, and that we really do see this as an opportunity for some very, very significant changes in the quality of programming available to children. And I've been very pleased with the conversation in the last 15 or 20 minutes because I think we've seen some really wonderful glimpses of what the power of this medium can be for children. Often we hear people talking about how if you all are trying to get educational programming, you want TV to be a blackboard, and that's going to be boring. And there's a kind of false dichotomy that people sometimes embrace when they think about this. But in fact, we're really talking about imaginative programming, challenging the imagination of the wonderful people who produce programming for children, and programming that's engaging, that can really, really involve kids in exciting new ways. So I'm heartened by this, and I encourage more discussion and dialogue and more innovation.
Thank you. I know, Mr. Chapman, if you could just speak in just a few words, how you do that.
Mrs. Gore, let me share with you our experience at Lynn Television in co-founding Bill Nye the Science Guy. It is indeed most unique in that it brings together segments of Hollywood and the broadcasting industry that never worked together before to do one thing, and that is to produce a children's educational program that kids would watch. Oftentimes, that is you try to accomplish that, but you never accomplish that. It brought together Disney in all the production and distribution capabilities in children's programming. It brought together public broadcasting and their very creative affiliate in Seattle, and the distribution of programming Monday through Friday in the public sector without commercials. And then it brought together Lynn Television and commercial television on a commercial basis Saturday and Sunday. And then finally, it brought together the talents, the unique talents of Bill Nye the Science Guy, who proved you could both entertain and educate. Today, there are two elements of the announcement that pleases me specifically as a broadcaster. The first one is that it allows us to disseminate, to provide information to the public within our communities through the internet, print, and over the air, and also to listen to them, their input to their community needs. 4.5 years ago, it was listening to those community needs that motivated Lynn Television to buy into the concept to support Bill Nye, the Science Guy.
And we're glad you did. Thank you very much. And now, Mr. President, we're finished with this particular part of the program, and like your comments.
Yes. First of all, I'd love this. I wish we had all day to listen to you all talk about this. We want to talk now about whether there are barriers to more and better children's programs, and if so, what they are. And I guess I would like to begin by welcoming the advertisers that are here and thanking them for their commitment to this announcement we've made today and to this cause generally. And I thought what Ms. LeVar said about being a worrier was a lot of the things she said I thought were quite on point, and I think that the role of advertisers in sort of changing the whole look of how we approach this issue could be quite critical. So I'm delighted that you're here, and we're now going on to a section about how we should define and recognize and then deliver quality in these programs and what barriers there are and how we would go about taking them down. And so I'm going to call on the Vice President to take over the last section.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. President. Let's spend a little time in this segment talking about the barriers to more and better children's programming. In many ways, today's session is a counterpart to the White House Summit on television that the President hosted several months back. With the V-chip, as others have pointed out, families will have an opportunity to block programming they feel is inappropriate for their young children. And as Tipper pointed out, they will also have the opportunity to select good programming, quality programming that they believe is beneficial for their children. How will the industry respond to this new reality? Advertisers, programmers, broadcasters, network executives, the cable industry, etc. In order to answer that question, we have to understand, or take a little time to try to better understand, why it didn't happen before, what the barriers are, and how we can overcome them. If with a V-chip, some programmers and advertisers for the first time have to worry that inappropriate programming is going to lead them to lose some of the audience that would otherwise be hypnotically transfixed by the programming, but because parents will have more tools at their disposal, now they're going to have to look at the possibility of a certain percentage of the audience being lost. That will begin to change some of the dynamics. But there are other aspects to this. And it's critically important to focus on the positive as well as just the negative. We know from the research that the First Lady and her panel discussed earlier that not only is negative imagery bad for children, but more importantly, in keeping with today's summit, positive programming, educational programming can really help children learn. It has many positive benefits. And we know from the panel that Tipper has just conducted here that there are a lot of successes, and we know good children's programming when we see it. LeVar Burton brought up the concern about what is the definition. It may well be that when the FCC acts, they will be able to make reference to good private sector efforts like that of the Annenberg School and say, well, this program or that program is cited as good quality children's programming, but according to a lot of these private sector groups that spend full time looking at this, it doesn't really pass muster. So it may be that a uniquely American solution for that problem can be found. Jerry Laburn expressed concern about regulation, and indeed, that's why the agreement that the President announced at the beginning of this session is so important, because the industry is now on board. And Peggy Charon and these network executives and programmers and the others are all together saying, yes, this is now a national goal, and we're all going to play our part. So it's got to go far beyond regulation. But with the industry on board and with everybody moving in the same direction, it's good to talk about why this hasn't happened before, without the President's leadership, without everybody getting together. The fact is there are a lot of barriers, and people in the industry know producers who've made great programming, and for economic and structural reasons, it hasn't gotten on. Linda Ellerby has built a career taking on hard issues, sort of like this one. her show, Nick News, provides youth with a different view of the world. And I'm sure if it were easy to do, she wouldn't be doing it. But I'd like to ask Linda Ellerby to start off the discussion of what these barriers are and why it hadn't happened before, and what direction do we need to move in now? Linda?
Thank you. Well, it's interesting. When we first began Nick News, the general consensus of information was that children had an attention span of about 30 seconds at most, and that this had been caused by television. And I sat around and I thought about that, and I thought, well, certainly the news, the grown-up news, if you will, has helped that. I can say that after 20 years, 25 years of working in it. And then I thought about all the wonderful Disney movies I'd seen, and I thought, well, if kids will sit through a movie, why won't they sit through longer? And we decided to go with longer programming, and as has been said here so often this morning, the purpose of our thrust, if you will, was to always respect the viewer and to say to them, you are smarter than your television. Now, getting Nick News on the air was not difficult, only because Nickelodeon, Jerry and Herb Scannell had made the decision that they wanted to do this. And I want at this point to say something that needs to be said here, and that is that cable has been a leader in this area. And everybody at the table knows this. And I'm proud to say that Nickelodeon has been a leader in cable in this area. All they said was make it good, make it understandable to kids. What we found out in the process was, I had colleagues from the, quote, real news world who said, well, you just dumb it down for kids, don't you? Well, no, you don't. My only answer was, I'm not sure how to make kids news, except I think you make it like the grown-up news, only very much better. and that was how we started, and it seems to have worked. And yes, we've won lots of awards, but what I love most is when I have parents and kids come up to me and say, you've given us something to watch together, because I believe there is a great hunger in this country for programs that parents and kids can watch together. In fact, possibly one of the finest compliments I ever got on this show was when Peggy Charon told me that she never truly understood Bosnia until she saw it explained on Nick News. The barriers, though, I can speak to them. I am a producer of television, and we need a little reality check here. And it needs to go like this. Wonderful programs like Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and Bill Nye, and Nick News, and Reading Rainbow do well. And we have been lucky. We are the lucky ones, and we know it, because we are successful. But we also know this. We have never gotten the ratings that Mighty Morphin Power Ranger gets. And the chances are slight that we will. And that is a reality we have to deal with as well. So I am so happy to see that the networks have decided that this is an important thing to do for the future of this country. And I would like, Les, you said this morning that it will not be easy, and that we fail more often than we succeed. So I would like to say to the networks, yes, you're right. It's not easy. It's never easy to find television that both educates and is entertaining. But one does not discover new lands without losing sight of the shore for a very long time. So I would encourage the networks, as you enter into this area more and more, to give it time. And Mr. President, I'm delighted that you invited the advertisers here. And I would urge you to use your influence, if you will, as you have with the broadcasters and the producers, to see what they can do and find, as the Vice President put it so well, perhaps some unique American solution to this. I know that your mission is to make money, but sometimes we have to come down to how much is enough. And I think when it comes to the kids of America, that the advertisers, as well as the parents and the producers and the broadcasters, have an obligation to step up to the plate here. And finally, if I may, I want to I want to say that, Mr. President, you and I have been nominated for a Primetime Emmy for the show that we did on smoking. Now, I don't know if another president has actually been nominated for an Emmy before, but I would like to extend an invitation for you to be my guest at the Emmys, and if we win, to accept on behalf of the kids of America.
They were good. It was not a dumbed-down program. It was a ratcheted up program. They were very, very
Kids
good.
are very smart. They're just so smart. They constantly, those of us in this room who work directly with kids know that you really can't lie to them. I mean, they'll see right through you. And they will ask the hardest questions, and which is why Nickelodeon is also covering the election. And we'll be back at you to ask some more questions this year.
Well, thank you very much, Linda. I'd like to call now on Jamie Kellner, who is the CEO of Warner Brothers Television Network. Mr. Kellner and Warner Brothers are actively pursuing the family program market, and something tells me that they're not doing it with the objective of losing money or viewers. These goals can be consistent with quality children's programming, can they not, Mr. Kellner?
I hope so. Losing a lot of money right now, trying. It was funny when I was listening to Jerry speak about the bars in the window. I was raised in the exact opposite family, Jerry. My father was like, go get him, just try anything, go get him. And so I've sort of lived my whole life with that storm the beaches, take the hill, and spent 8 years building the Fox network as the president of the Fox network. And when I left that, I sat down with my yellow pad and I said, what's missing? And what I saw was that the networks were all heading toward a new program strategy in the early part of the evening, which dealt with delivering more younger adults versus the kid-driven, more family-oriented programs. And so we have convinced Tribune and Warner Brothers to invest a lot of money to build a network, which we underline as the place America's family watches television together in the family hour. And that is the motto. We never breach it. We don't run anything between 8 and 9 o'clock that you can't watch and feel very comfortable with your kids sitting there. I have a 6-year-old, and it's, I'm very careful about that. At 9 o'clock, if we run something with adult content, we pull the shade down, and Michigan J. Frog comes on and says, okay, Tadpole's off to bed. This one's for Mom and Dad. And it's just, it is trying to really pick up that niche that Mrs. Gore suggested was looking for some place, and Salaby said is looking for some place to watch television together. I think it's, I think that we're in a very competitive industry. The television business, between all the cable channels and the new broadcast networks, it is very, very competitive. And in order to succeed in the future, I think each network is going to have to identify itself and its mission and attack an audience, very vigorously in many, many day parts. And the reason that most of them have left or are not putting as much family programming on as they did is the multiple set viewing. Kids tend to be going into the one room and the adults are going to another room. And it's been harder and harder to get advertisers to pay high rates to get into what is traditionally the family type show. But I believe that's a chicken and egg problem. I believe, as Mr. Cosby said earlier, that if you put the goods on the screen that attract the whole family back together, you'll get them all sitting there, as I do with my son, on my knee, and have one of the great moments of our day together, is when we're sitting together watching. So that's our objective. Obviously, if you're going to set yourself up to be that place, you have an enormous responsibility to do things in the other day parts with kids that will go beyond the kinds of things we're talking about here today. And that is one of the things that we are right now committed to, developing, trying to break through to do things that will attract high rating levels and offer the kinds of educational messages and pro-social messages that we want to give to kids. So that's our mission.
Great. Thank you very much. I'd like to now move to Jim Steyer. Just in the last week, JP Kids, and Jim Steyer is CEO of JP Kids Incorporated. JP Kids announced a major deal with the National Association of Broadcasters to produce a 30-minute children's magazine show. I'd like to ask you, Jim, as founder and CEO, to tell us how this came about. And incidentally, thank you for being at the family conference in Nashville a year ago. Several of the people here were. I remember your presentation well. Tell us about this magazine deal.
Well, thank you for giving me the chance to actually speak for the first time as a member of the industry as opposed to an advocate, which is an interesting change. But basically it came out of the idea of saying if we're going to face a new era of need for quality kids programming, that all of us ought to be looking to work together. And people who have been on different sides on different issues ought to take a look at how we can do this best. And so it's an interesting partnership in the same way that I think a lot of the people around the table here today represent an interesting partnership and a commitment to making TV good for kids. I think that when you look at the barriers that you've been talking about, that Jerry and Linda have hit on some really important things that we need to remember. What Jerry said earlier about attracting the best and the brightest is really critical. I think that every person here who creates kids programming has talked about the need for fun and entertainment, and starting by keeping kids interested and entertained. And that's the best and the brightest, and that's that great creative talent that has to be brought in to do stuff. And I think the issues that Linda just raised are also really important in terms of these barriers as well, and I hope we'll be able to do it in some of this stuff that we create. And that means, I think, a new commitment on the part of the advertisers. I'm glad Linda brought that up, but really I find as somebody who's new to this side of the business, that we need leadership from the advertisers more than anything else, probably. I find the network executives are very much open to doing great stuff. I look around the room and I see the leaders, the best in kids programmers here. And I also know they have to get a rating and they have to get an audience. And so I think that anything that can come out of here, and leadership from you, Mr. President, Mr. Vice President, that encourages advertisers to support quality kids programming, because Bill Nye the Science Guy will never get the same rating as Action Man will. Maybe, Bill, maybe. But we've got to look at advertisers in that way. And I think that the government could be pretty creative in this way as well, because I think that there could be a variety of different ways that you could ask concerned adults, either on a checkoff, say on when you vote, to subsidize quality programming for kids, or you might provide tax incentives to stuff, so that programs that are very good and high quality and do a good job could be supported and make the same kind of revenue for a programmer who's at the end of the day got to answer to a bottom line. And I think the last thing, which goes back to your question, Mr. Vice President, in terms of partnerships, is that we all have to take risks. That there's such an opportunity here. Everybody around this table knows what an extraordinary opportunity there is to use media, not just television, but the new media and the internet, to educate kids. But to do it, we're going to have to take risks and become partners with people we haven't been partners with before. And I think all of us will do that with the kind of leadership that we get from you all. That has been an incredibly important thing for all of us. And I don't know, but I'm pretty optimistic after I hear the kinds of things that have been said here today. So thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Did you want to add a comment?
Yes, I'm concerned that one of the barriers that we've been talking about industry barriers, but another barrier is trying to motivate the adult of this community, the adults of America, not just parents, but adults, to be more aware and vigilant of this conversation. Now, for 40 years, we've had a circle of blame about this issue. And what is exciting about today is that we've changed the discourse. We've changed the direction of the discourse to say, let's talk about something that's positive. And I'd like to hold up the idea of the environmental movement. You know, the environmental movement is, when we first think about it, is about toxic pollution and cleaning up the problems and all of that. But it's also, what's really the heart and soul of the environmental movement is about interdependence and harmony between planet Earth and its inhabitants. So I want to propose that one of the barriers we have to overcome is a negativity that we can do anything about this. And that the whole concept of the media literacy movement, which the Center for Media Literacy and those of us who work in this field represent, is the opportunity to transform that discourse from blaming and focusing on the negative and protecting children from bad things, to enhancing and empowering and transforming the way kids and all of us relate to television in our lives. And so as a leader of the media literacy movement, I want to pledge that we want to broaden that and stimulate that discourse to really encourage people to participate in the media culture and not just moan and groan about it.
Absolutely. I certainly agree with that. And the announcement made by the entertainment industry here at the White House several months ago about the voluntary agreement to rate all programming will be of a big benefit to parents who want to be empowered to take part in this. And indeed, the discourse has been changed. And during the negotiations over the weekend, it was evident that there is leadership in this industry toward creating a new reality. I want to call on Judith McHale, who's President and Chief Operating Officer of Discovery Communications, to talk a little bit about what needs to be done.
Well, there's been a lot of conversation about what are the barriers, and I think Discovery history of how we got to where we are is sort of an interesting one. John C. is here. He was one of the early backers of Discovery, and he probably remembers that John Hendricks went around and must have given about 200 pitches to people about this quality educational service that he was going to put on. And about 200 people shut the door and said, kind of nice, I might watch it once in a while, but nobody else would do it. 9 years later, we're a $4 billion corporation distributed in over 140 countries around the world. And how did we succeed and why did we succeed? I think we did because we tapped into people's curiosity, their desire to learn about themselves and about the world around them. And I think it demonstrates that when you do that and you sort of take your business out and believe in it, that you can have remarkable success. We want to take those same principles and translate it to kids. Kids are curious. They're very curious about the world around them. They love bugs. They love sharks. And if you take the kind of programming that we do, which is what we're planning on doing, and give it an attitude and a kid's attitude and make it funny, as Dr. Crosby has said, I think the potential for sort of building an audience and having a commercially viable business is enormous. And I think over the next couple of years, we see this as being a critical component of our business as we go forward.
Well, thank you very much. And speaking also of leadership in the industry, I want to call on Rich Frank, who is president of the Academy of Television Arts and Sciences, chairman and CEO of C3, a company that he created with Comcast Corporation. Rich, thank you for your leadership. I know that you made a significant speech at a recent NAB meeting, and we could feel the awareness within the industry during the final stage of these negotiations. And is it that hard to overcome these barriers that have existed, or can this new commitment on the part of the industry quickly result in a flood of new high-quality children's programming?
Well, thank you for the nice words. I think we're at a time where things can change. There have been tremendous barriers in the past, I think always going back to an economic barrier. It was always a ratings excuse, it was an advertiser excuse, it was some type of, it was going to ruin the program schedule, the flow of audience, on and on. There was always one excuse after the other. But I think we sit at a time that's very interesting. We're going through this unbelievable convergence of television and cable, computer and telephone, which is bringing a lot of things together, which is going to change the way America and the world gets their education, their information, and their entertainment. And so I think it's an appropriate time to look forward to see how all of these things can come together and maybe eliminate some of these barriers. The exciting thing to me today is I think everybody's acknowledgement of the fact that if we don't address the social issues with the children of this country today, all we will be doing is treating a lot of symptoms. Eventually, they will grow up and change society for us all. We don't address them and let them grow, we're never going to solve any of the big problems. And so I think it's a great opportunity. I think if you listen to everybody around the room, a lot of the economic problems will be overcome. Business is good for most people, and I think they're willing to try a little harder, maybe make a few less dollars in a few time periods. I think the advertisers are willing to come forward and support things. I think it is competitive enough out there that broadcasters and cable, in the right sense of being competitive with each other, will bring about better programming. And I think you're going to see some changes, and I'm excited about what you announced this morning.
Well, thank you very much. we haven't had an Hispanic or Latino perspective. I want to ask maybe Ray Rodriguez or Augusto Falde if you have a comment to make.
Well, I think tremendous progress has been made. I think it's a great day for kids, and I think we have to encourage parents to get their kids to watch. I think that's very important, and I think we can do that through television and through other public policy help. And we have to find a way to encourage development of great television. We have Plaza Sesamo on the air, which is Sesame Street, which was developed by Children's Television Workshop, and that has been fantastic for our kids. But we have to find ways to encourage more of that kind of, to the development of more of that kind of programming to serve our kids.
Great.
Appreciate it.
Augusto?
Yeah, Mr. Gore, Dr. Cosby talked about immigrants who come to this country and learn English through television. I am one of those immigrants, and I'm very thankful to television because I learned how to speak the language through TV. One thing that, as we look at the power of television in this country, is that it's not just deciding that children programming is the right thing and to provide that, but it's the inclusion of these communities. Our communities and the Latino community, I grew up in Los Angeles, are very different needs, and trying to include the needs of these and reflecting, as I said before, the needs of these different communities in the programming that we develop. Maybe it's something that cannot be done on a national level, but in these communities, Latino children make up the second largest group of children in the country, next to non-Hispanic whites. And I think there is tremendous opportunity, providing there is more access, there is more interest from the advertising community, that it makes sense to address this. It makes sense for the country, and it makes sense for the advertisers who are creating loyalties early on. So really listening to those local audiences.
Thank you very much. Herb Scannell with Nickelodeon's had his hand up.
I'd like to say a couple of things. First of all, Jerry and Linda, thank you for all the kind comments about Nickelodeon. I do think that Nickelodeon, if there's something that we can leave behind for Nickelodeon about kids and television, is that it's important to be brave. And I think that, I worked at Nickelodeon for 8 years, and Jerry was a great inspiration in challenging all of us to challenge conventional wisdom, to ask questions about why things were on television, and not necessarily do what everybody was doing, but do something different. And I think out of that comes some great ideas. Nick News, there wasn't a news show for kids on television. We made a news show for kids, and Linda Ellerby has made a great news show. And we also put, if you look at some of the other shows that we've done, we put girls in starring roles on Nickelodeon. That hadn't been a mainstay of kids television, and we did that because we asked the question, where were the girls in kids television? So I think really the message is, you got to be brave and not just to follow what the market says you should be doing or where the buck's going to be, but if you build it, they will come.
Right.
And we have proven that, and we have proven it because now we're a top-rated network in all of cable television, and advertisers now think of Nickelodeon as a must-buy because we were brave.
Incidentally, I remember 15, 20 years ago when the major networks did have children's news programs that were terrific, and maybe one of the many outcomes of the agreement the President announced today would be a new economic environment, a new creative environment in which those kinds of programmings return to the networks as well. Urban Duggan had his hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I want to say a word on behalf of PBS, which is a bit of a pioneer in all of this question of children's broadcasting. I've heard several programs mentioned here today, Reading Rainbow, Bill Nye, Sesame Street, Wishbone, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. All of these are PBS programs, and we consider this a great day for children because we are children's advocates. Mr. President, Mr. Vice President, your wives, you have been consistent advocates for children, and you have been consistent advocates for better television for children. I've never seen a better use of the bully pulpit of the White House than what you have put forward on this issue. There are two obstacles or barriers that I want to mention just briefly. The first is a conceptual barrier that I think some of us around this table may be guilty of. We don't say that in order to see, we have to be sure that the right eye and the left eye work together, and that we don't make a big distinction between our right eye and our left eye. And I think we're in danger of creating a barrier by making a distinction between what is entertaining and what is educational. Our ideal should be to obliterate that distinction and to think, just as our two eyes are one in sight, of education and entertainment as one in purpose. And in the best children's programming, we do that. We've done it for 25 years on PBS. And for us to be guilty of this nervous saying, we have to be sure that we educate and entertain at the same time, is to make a distinction that we should be graduating from, and that can be a conceptual barrier. We need to make it just as the two eyes are one in sight. The second thing, and here I disagree a little bit with my good friend and colleague Jerry Leyburn, about a way of helping parents find what is good and what has special educational intent. I believe in the welter of programming, the world of 100 channels or 200 channels. As that good, educationally valuable programming emerges, we are going to need an icon or a label to find programming with that purpose. Not a label that says spinach, but one that says kid-smart programming that parents can find and that children can find and that means something. So I think we need to explore that idea a little further. We at PBS are eager to help the entire industry here. We are prepared to make a contribution to the Children's Endowment if we can be joined by our colleagues in the commercial industry to jumpstart that part of the Children's Television Act. And we are going to move our children's programming, we're now doing it, for what we call the Sesame Street graduates. We need to appeal to older children as well, not just the preschool ages. So we are pledged to do more than we've been doing. We now do 7 to 10 hours a day of children's programming, not 3 hours a week, and we are eager to join hands with our colleagues and make this voluntary effort work.
Thank you very much. David Britt from Children's Television Workshop.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I think this is a wonderful day, although Oscar the Grouch doesn't like it much. He doesn't like this whole getting along and a commitment to do good things. I think it's a powerful statement that we are making here to move this industry and to bring together educators as well as entertainers. And as Irvin says, to look at it the same way. We can make a difference, and I think if we put the education together with the entertainment, put content on the plot line, as we call it, particularly for older kids, we will find that we won't be sitting here 3 years from now saying, gee, we can't get the ratings. We can get the ratings. Kids will watch this good stuff. And I guess the only other thing I would add is that what is absolutely essential for entertainment programming, and as Les Moonves said, there's failure on all kinds of programming, more so than there is success. We do need to have promotion. Promotion that will drive viewers and kids, as well as their parents and families, to watch. I think if we do all of those things, we can be very, very proud of what we've accomplished here today.
We're running out of time. We've run a little bit over time, in fact, but I want to call on just a couple more. Jack Myers, I'd like to ask you to discuss what advertisers can and will do to make more educational programming available.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Advertisers have been mentioned many times here today, and it's both appropriate and necessary, since advertisers are the financial underpinnings of the television industry, that they be included in this dialogue, and they wholeheartedly embrace and support the initiatives begun here today. We do have some recommendations specifically. First of all, we applaud, David, the Ollie Awards, and we'll do everything we can to support and promote the Ollie Awards, increase their visibility, and we urge you to include not only programming, but advertisers, broadcasters, producers, and talent in the recognition process. And Mr. Duggan, in response to your call for a label of some sort, we propose, in keeping with the spirit of the Olympics, perhaps a gold medal award for quality children's television programming. We also will initiate the formation by leading advertisers of a laboratory, understanding that economics and marketing issues must be addressed in this process. Leading national advertisers will work to form a laboratory to explore these issues, identify those issues, economic and marketing, that can lead to the further development, support, promotion, production, and distribution of quality children's television. And lastly, Linda, I also applaud your call for further leadership from the White House. And if invited, a larger group of advertisers would be pleased and would welcome the opportunity to return here on your timetable with a specific set of initiatives and commitments that advertisers will be prepared to support along these lines and in response to the initiatives begun here today. In addition to Mr. Io from Lego Systems, who spoke earlier, Ann McDonald from Pizza Hut, Bob Mears from Reebok, and John Sarson, president of the Association of National Advertisers, are here today. And I thought Ann from Pizza Hut might have just a couple of additional comments. Thank you.
I think as representative of the advertisers, one, it's a terrific meeting, and I think I echo a lot of the feelings that have been expressed this morning. And the reason that it is such a critical issue for us, number one, kids are not only important to us as a nation, but they're also an important element of our business. And it's also very encouraging to me, knowing that I go out there every year looking for programming to purchase, that there is and does seem to be a greater dedication to better programming. I think in listening to some of the other folks that spoke, I'd have to echo both Mr. Britt as well as Dr. Cosby. And I often hear people talking about the ratings game. And boy, all I know is that we used to hustle in the beginning of every single year and try to buy the very limited space on Mr. Cosby's program. And I think that that situation, and I look forward to that situation happening in children's programming. And I think if you take the talent in this room, as well as the talent that exists outside of this room, that that should exist. And I look forward to trying to be first in line to buy the time on that programming.
Where were you during the Cosby mysteries?
Not only that, in case you're aware, Mr. Cosby has a new show this year on CBS, 8 o'clock on Monday night, and we would love to sell you some time.
Let me say the President has authorized me to say we accept the suggestion from Jack Myers to have a follow-up meeting with the advertising community to further the discussion on these topics, and I think that is a great suggestion. And if there are other ideas that people want to suggest as follow-ups, please let us know. We were talking here privately with Dr. Cosby about the idea of actors forming an actors endowment for children's educational television to create a bank of free time and free performances. And he's agreed to talk further with us and head that up. So there's some other suggestions that you all may want to make after this meeting. Let me ask Vicki Rideout briefly, because we've really run over. But Vicki is the Director of Children and Media Programs with Children Now.
Thanks. I think that the biggest barrier to getting quality children's educational programming on TV fell this morning, thanks to your leadership, and that was the idea that educational TV can't create as large a profit for a station or an advertiser as a non-educational show. And the beautiful thing about the rule that you've proposed today is that it's going to level the playing field and level the risk so that every station will be airing the same amount of programming. They will know that that programming has to meet the test to be truly educational. They'll be airing it within similar time periods. So I think that leveling the financial risk to stations is probably helping to overcome the biggest barrier. In addition, things that I think advertisers can do is to perhaps commit to using a portion of their advertising dollars on educational shows. This is something that Jerry Laybourne has suggested. There was $1 billion in advertising on children's programs last year. A portion of that can go to support educational programs for kids. They can help build an audience for that show, for those educational shows, the same way that they do for other shows, through merchandising tie-ins and that kind of thing. So I think there's a lot of room for progress here.
We've run out of time. There are others who would want to speak, but Mr. President, I think it's obvious from the three panels that we've just heard that this is the beginning of a new era for children's television in America. And coupled with the VCHIP and the ratings announcement of several months ago, This is really revolutionizing children's television. So that's the end of this panel, and turn it back to you.
Let me thank all of you, first of all, for coming, and those of you who participated in this historic agreement. I'm very grateful to you. You've done a good thing for your country today. I do not want to leave us on a down note, but I want to put this in the context of what I think the real stakes are of what we're discussing here. And I leave you with this thought, a challenge to think about another barrier that has nothing to do with the production of the programs or even getting money to advertise it, which is, how are you going to get these programs to the kids that need to see them the most, the kids that are most at risk in our society, and how are you going to reach their parents? And I want to just ask you to think about these two facts. One is, while we are, at least inside our administration, we are very happy that the crime rate has gone down for 4 years in a row in America. It's a wonderful thing. 4 years in a row of a drop in crime rate. The rate of random violence among people between the ages of 12 and 17 is going up. Cocaine use has dropped by a third. But the rate of random drug use among people between the ages of 12 and 17 has been going up since 1991. Fact one. Second thing, when school starts this fall, 51.7 million children will enroll in schools. And it's the first time since the oldest of the baby boomers, since the baby boomers were fully in school, that there's been a class of school children bigger than the baby boom generation. Which means we have a few years to turn these trends around or reap a whirlwind from it. Basically, if you look at all the aggregate statistics in our country, it seems that most things are moving in the right direction after years of being troubled. But there are just so many of these kids out here that are either virtually raising themselves or their parents, almost all of whom I believe would like to do a good job, but they want to do a good job, but they're not sure how they should do it. So one huge barrier here that we have not discussed, because it's sort of beyond our purview, but that a lot of you who are brilliant at marketing things to people and reaching people is, how do you reach the parents? You know, I had a pretty good education, but I learned a lot because Chelsea was into Sesame Street and Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego. When I met the co-leaders of San Marino at the Olympics, I knew where it was because Chelsea got me into Where in the World is Carmen. Not because I had a degree from the Foreign Service School at Georgetown. I'm just saying, how do we reach the parents? This is a serious issue. And secondly, if you cannot reach the parents, is there some way to reach the kids anyway? We're trying to give schools more funds, for example, to open early and stay open late. Is there some way to redirect the programs in there so that, and work with the schools so that they will show the programs to the kids in the after-school area? You really need to think about this, because the kids that need what you're doing the most may have barriers that we haven't even discussed today. I want to make one last point. I think it would be very good for the adults of this country, including all of us who work in the White House, if Mr. Rogers' poem could be read once a week on primetime television. Thank you, and God bless you all. Thank you.